What's up, everybody? Kellen from Action Backers here. Hopefully, you're having a great week. Wednesday, September 18th. I'm really excited for a number of reasons. So, first of all, my hockey season starts tomorrow night. So, I'll be back on the ice playing. I play 2 or 3 times a week. So, I'm pumped for that. Get out, see the boys, have a good time. That also means that the NHL is closer to getting started. And as anyone knows who's followed me on Twitter for a while, watched the YouTube channel, hockey is my main sport. It's a sport I love to bet, and it's a sport I know the most about and that I spend the most time on, and that makes me and people like you who follow the most money. So with that being said, I thought today would be a good time. I've had lots of requests. Thank everyone for subscribing and for leaving your comments. So I've had tons of requests to sort of show like my model and what I do and maybe how you can start building a model of your own. So I'm going to go through that a little bit in depth. If that sounds boring to you or if you don't care about this, then now's probably a good time to head out. No hard feelings. I'll be back with some other content in the next couple videos. But for now, I want to get into this. And one other thing that I'm really excited to announce is I wrote a book. So it's not super long. It's like 50 pages, but it's a sports betting book on how to profit and bet like a pro. So you can get it on Amazon Kindle if you want. I think right now it's going for $3 or $4. You can get a paperback copy if you want as well. But if you want to support me, I walk you through everything that I do to win at sports betting and the why behind why I do things and what I'm looking for. Again, check it out. I'll leave a link down below in the description. But with that being said, let's get into it. So I'm sure you can see behind me or behind my head here is my model. So this is sort of I actually just finished working on this. Just finished it today. Won't this go away? There we go. And it's a little bit different than what I did in years past. So I'm still testing it, still trying it out, but I like what I see so far. So this is sort of at a high level what we're looking at. So you can see here, can enter in the team from the drop down, as well as the starting goalies. So I do take into consideration save percentage a little bit, as well as a few other things. And essentially, I'm just trying to get the expected goals for. So you can see a lot of different models take into consideration tons of different things. I like to keep it fairly simple. While this is kind of complex in its own right, it's not using 100 different stats or anything like that. It's really simple. When you break it down, hockey's a simple sport. One other cool thing is a kid I coached. He actually just got drafted to the NHL this year, so he's going to be a St. Louis Blue, which is pretty awesome. But anyways, when you break it down, it's a simple sport, right? Like you want to understand the team's expected goals for, and see if they're going to let goals in, and see what their goalies are going to do, if their goalie can stop a puck or not. That's really what it breaks down to. So we have the expected goals for, and then we have a couple other things that I'll get into later. And essentially, this just will calculate what my probability of Team X winning is. So you can see, like right here, in a given day, the Leafs would beat the Oilers. There's a 60.87% chance that would happen. And then that converts that into odds, as well as my projected total. And you can also see over here in my Poisson distribution, it sort of has where it's greenest, the highest percentage, so roughly around 2-2. So the predicted score would be somewhere between like 2-2 or 3-2 Toronto, possibly 3-3 type thing. So that's what that's showing. It's just a nice visual representation. Excuse me. But again, this is just a predicted total. And I use this if I have the sports book to match. So if the total's 6 and say this was 4.5, my total, I might consider taking the under if it was higher than maybe, but typically like a full point is what I'm looking for. And then this just breaks down where the value is. So I'll explain this a little bit more detail in a few minutes, but I want to show you how it works first. So again, I mentioned this distribution, and this updates whenever you change team and the goalies, things like that. And then down here I have really the bread and butter, and this is the main part of the model. So this is just breaking down teams by their attacking and defense strengths, both home and away. So it's really important when you're doing things like this. You need to consider both home factors and road factors. It's not as crazy as say like football, where you have to factor in weather as well, but like different stadiums play, or baseball, obviously the Red Sox at Fenway plays a lot different than out in San Diego or something like that. But this is really important. And so essentially all you're looking at here is green is good, red is bad, which makes sense. So for attacking strength, anything over 1 means they're above average at, and anything below 1 means they're not the best at. And then for defense, it's actually the opposite. So with defensive strengths, lower is better, higher is worse. And if you want to know how accurate this is, if we just go through and we look, obviously the best teams would be green across the board. So if we look, Boston, yep, they're in the Stanley Cup final. And if we go through, the only other team is Tampa, and they were far and away the best team in the regular season last year. Obviously fell short and were upset in the first round of the playoffs, but that's neither here nor there. And then you look, like you have a lot of other good teams. Winnipeg, 3 out of 4. Washington, Vegas, 3 out of 4. Toronto, 3 out of 4. St. Louis, Stanley Cup winners, 3 out of 4. Pittsburgh, Nashville, Columbus, Colorado, and that is it. But those are your basically your playoff teams, right? Like there are a few teams that made the playoffs that don't have 3 out of 4, but it's a really good indicator of the strength of a given team. So obviously, if you have and this factors in, this is what this offense and defense is. So this factors in. So if you have a road team that are really really strong on the road, so maybe you have the Leafs on the road against someone who's weak at home, like Buffalo, for instance, then that sort of factors in. And these are all weighted, and there's a bunch of calculations that I'm not going to get into up here. So that's sort of how I come up with these numbers, and it goes into my weighting factor for expected goals for. And that's really what we're basing it on. Because the expected goals for it's the most important thing, I think. So the other thing is then we factor in save percentage, obviously. So, Frederick Anderson has a better save percentage than Garrett Sparks. And I know Garrett Sparks isn't playing for the Leafs anymore, but just as an example, you can see it updates what. So that's how I'm determining sort of what the win percentage is. So if we look along the bottom, we can go to simulations, and this is what I have set up here. So it's just essentially taking, it's randomizing in a range. So I used their expected goals for as a baseline, and I've calculated the expected goals for based on a few different statistics that I have in some of these other sheets that I'll cover in a second. And then using a random number generator and some functions, I've essentially come up with random scores within an order of magnitude relative to the expected goals for. So when you go through these 10, and it runs 10,000 simulations. So it takes quite a while, a couple minutes, not like anything crazy, but when I'm trying to record the video as well, it eats up a lot of resources. So essentially, here you can see the simulations listed out, and it's simply just going through. So it pulls the teams in from who I've selected on the other sheet, and then it just goes through and it generates a random score within given parameters. So you can see here, 5-1 Edmonton, 4-1 Leafs, et cetera, et cetera. But when you average these all out, it actually comes remarkably close to the expected goals. So that's why on the other page in the model, you're seeing scores around 5.5 or 6 and not 8 or 9, even though some of these scores are, they're fairly high. And then again, to get the probability, I just take the away win and total it. So essentially, a win is 1, a loss is 0, and then adding up all of the wins in the column and dividing it by 10,000 gives you your win probability for the away team, and then you do the same for the home team. I've also calculated a margin just to see, if there are any discrepancies, maybe for puck line. So like you can see, if the average differential in a given series is 2, then it might be worth maybe playing the puck line. But that's not something I've really worked into the model. It's just more just for info, and because I couldn't think of anything to put in this third column, and I didn't want to leave it with 2. I'm OCD. So once this win probability is run through and spit out, it shows up here in my win percentage, and again that will automatically update the odds. So basically what my fair odds are, and then from there there's only a few other things left to calculate. So basically we would have to enter in the odds that the bookmaker is giving us, and from that we can then use the Kelly criterion. So this is set up to automatically take inputs from the model, and it's just sort of running in the background. I have another video on YouTube. I know lots of people have checked it out with the Kelly criterion, so I'm not going to go into it in depth. If you want to learn about that and to get an actual worksheet where I built out like calculators for you, then go ahead and grab it. It's there. But essentially this is just running in the background. So again, it just pulls in the team and then inputs the odds. And then basically whatever the highest value is, it will spit out and display that value here, as well as the team that you should be taking. So the thing about this is, while my win percentage shows up, we're still finding value, right? Like that's what we care about. It's finding value. So just because this says that the Leafs are, based on my projection, 61%, that doesn't mean anything. What matters is comparing your projections to what the bookmakers have and seeing if there's value there. So a lot of misconceptions around value betting. Some people think that value betting means only betting underdogs, which is not true. I certainly bet a lot of underdogs because there's a lot of value typically in them, but value just means finding better value in the line than is available. So, for instance, 61% for the Leafs to win, but the books were paying as if they only had 52%, then that's huge value, and I would take that all day long, even though they're a favorite in that scenario. So to sort of demonstrate, and then I just have this sets up. So this is the Kelly output. So if it's a negative, obviously never bet it. If it's between 0 and 4%, then that I usually don't bet that either. Typically I'm looking, between 5 to 10 where I'll start making some considerations, and then anything 10 plus I'm hammering big time. So to use this quickly, I can just use like a previous game or a past game. So I have SBR open, and I'm just going to choose a date. So I'm multitasking here. I have old box scores on my phone, and and I'm gonna use SBR as well. So if you're ever wondering for like past games, finding like closing lines and stuff like that, because that's important too. You want to make sure you're beating closing lines. And for past scores, you can just use something like this, or I've mentioned like Odds Portal and Odds Shark in the past as well. So we are going to go to Thursday, January 17th. And for the first one, okay, so we can do the Leafs and the Lightning. So I just want to check the line history. And we'll start with the opening line. We don't need to run through this all the time, or more than one, but we'll start with the opener. So the opening line was Toronto plus 127, Tampa minus 140, and the over, if we care about the over at all, was 6.5. So 127, 140. So now all we'll do is come to the model, and we'll input. I just do it so I can input the American odds. So the away team is Toronto and 127. And the home team, Tampa, was minus 140. And I'm just going to double check. My memory's terrible. 127, 140, yep. Okay. And then this, we're going to set to 6.5. Now, I'm just going to make sure. So I have to change this, obviously, to Tampa. And I'm going to lag shortly because it's about to run all those simulations every time I update any of these cells. And now we've entered that. So now we wait. Okay, so that's done now. So you can see based on the parameters, the value is on the Leafs, but there was actually no value on the Leafs. It was negative. So that just means that was the higher of the two negatives. Here, so we wouldn't bet this, which is too bad. Obviously, we don't want to just be results oriented. This game actually ended up with a final score of 4-2 Toronto, and you can see the distribution of projected scores was somewhere between 2-2 and 3-3. 4-2 Toronto only had like a 3% chance of happening. So yeah, that's how that works. We can do one more quickly. So I'll just use the same day, see if there's a game that had any value. So let's use the Blackhawks and the Rangers. So the Blackhawks were away. So we had 118, 130. So Chicago 118, Rangers 130. Again, 118 and minus 130. And, oops. That's a money puck. I use that to compare and contrast, and they're at 6.5 as well. So sometimes if I'm not sure or to see, I'll use money puck. It's a public thing. I've talked about them before in a couple blog posts and things like that, but they have a pretty cool model. So I just like to compare mine and see if I'm against them, if I'm with them type things, and then see how off or different my outcomes compared to theirs are. And it's a good way. It's like a sanity check. There's more than one way to come to value. So I like to use them the odd time. So we're just waiting, and again, sometimes it's tricky and it'll bounce. It'll look like it's done, and then, it'll wait, and then the numbers will jump. But essentially, this is what we're looking for. So in this game, even though the Rangers are favorites, slight favorites, there was a little bit of value in the Blackhawks. So again, this is yellow. It's right on the verge. I probably wouldn't bet this game, to be honest. I would like to see it a little bit higher, but this would be like on the verge of there is some value there in the Blackhawks. Again, not to be results oriented, they ended up losing this game 4-3. So the win percentage was actually correct. And again, like it's not just about the win percentage. I could probably make some money if I just went off of my win percentage, but you're going to end up paying a lot of juice because you're going to bet tons and tons of over favorited teams and things like that. So I prefer to try and find value like this. But it really, how you choose to bet and what you do with your model is up to you. So a couple other things. Again, this is mainly I like to do things in Google Sheets. It's easier for me. I don't have to work with R or anything like that. I don't know. I would prefer not to if I can help it. So I like to use a sheet. Keeps it simple. I am using tons of formulas though, so the sheet, it gets really slow and bogged down. So again, I'm using tons of VLOOKUPs, mainly to pull things from different pages and things like that. And then again, I break things down. So we talked about this attacking strength versus defensive strength. So to get that, you can see here's a worksheet that I'm pulling all the stats in from. And the nice thing is with Google Sheets, you can actually just use the import HTML function. So I'm just pulling this from naturalstattrick.com. And when you go to Natural Stat Trick, it's actually set up in a table already, and then you don't have to copy and paste. You just import the HTML from the URL, and then whenever this updates, the sheet will update. I think it updates hourly. So obviously I'm looking at working with past data right now, but as the season gets going, it will give me up to the minute data, and then I've set it up in such a way that everything in the sheet, everything that can be updated automatically will be updated with up to the hour stats, I guess, or up to the day stats. So essentially, you can see here, I've got a couple tables, a home and a road table, and this is what a lot of things are looking off of. And this is essentially how I've built the home and away attack and defense rankings. And then I have the goalie. So same thing. I've pulled in every goalie for the last, I want to say 2 seasons. Yeah. So for all my data, I've only used the past 2 seasons for a number of reasons, just with salary caps and people changing and things like that. I don't like going too far back. And actually the main reason is with the introduction to Vegas. They've only been around for 2 seasons, and I want to make sure that they weren't getting skewed at all by having not as much data. So I've just kept it simple, 2 seasons across the board. And then once the season starts, after the first 10 or 15 games, I'll probably switch it, and I'll run just that, and then compare it to that plus last season, sort of double. But the goalie is, again, fairly simple, and I've just pulled this in from Natural Stat Trick. You can see the only thing I've done is add that average at the bottom, just so I can pull that through in a data set there. And then simply with special teams, again, I break everything up. So everything else, so in this import HTML channel and in all of the attack and defense strength, this is 5-on-5 even strength. I keep special teams separately, and I factor them into my expected goals for in here separately, so they're their own thing. I just find that's cleaner, and it's just better and a little bit more accurate. So again, everything's split home and road. It's really important to split home and road, power play and penalty kill. And again, these are sort of like my worksheets, and the outputs are being pulled through onto the main model page. But this is essentially how I built the attack and defense. So essentially, you just take the attacking strength, defensive strength, and that's just based off of taking, so Winnipeg is just for their attacking strength at home. You would just go up to their power play. Where is it? Right here. And you would just take their average goals for and divide that by the average, the league average, goals for. And then you would do the same for defensive strength, and then you'd do the same for away, et cetera, and move down the list. And that's sort of how you get your rankings for that. And then again, the simulations are super simple. So that's really it, guys. I'm still playing around. And like I said, I use my model, and I also will compare to other models. I don't factor in injuries or anything like that. I watch the game and follow the game very closely. So if there are like major injuries, then I'll probably just, almost take like a handicapping approach, and just forego that that game, or make some adjustments, maybe bet less or something like that. But for the most part, I am using numbers and betting those numbers. And even though I'm a big Leaf fan, I like money more. So hopefully this has been useful. I know I didn't go step by step showing you how to configure everything. Really, that's up to you. Honestly, if I can learn it, you can learn it. I learned by studying and by watching YouTube. I used to work at a sports book, and I didn't know how to do this until after. So you can definitely learn. Just type in, even go to YouTube and search for how to build a sports book, how to build a betting model, or things like that. That's how I learned how to do this. This I just Googled, and this is trial and error. And I watched a guy's video called Underdog Chance, and he sets his model up like this, but he doesn't tell you how to build it. So I just sort of like figured it out because I like the layout. That's really everything, guys. Thanks for watching. I know this was long. Apologize if it was a bit boring and laggy, but lots of you have been asking. So this is sort of how I make my predictions and how I've won, 40 units or something like that last year, and I'm hoping to make a lot more as we go as well. The last thing to note is just based on like the Kelly criterion. I just make this a percentage of my bankroll. So it's basically like I'll bet. I don't like using betting units, but that's sort of how I'll break it down. So if it's, like I said, if it's between 0 and 5, I'm not touching it. If it's 5, I'll consider it. If it's just above 5, then I'll usually bet whatever happens to work out to like 2% of my bankroll that day. So if it's $1,000, then I'm betting $20. And if it's above a 5, so if it gets into like the 10 range, then I'm really like I'm hammering it. Like I still won't go crazy, but I'll go up to 5-ish% of my bankroll. I use a moving average on my bankroll, so I'll essentially reset at the end of every week. So if I started the week with 1,000, then my I would bet 2% of that, so that'd be $20. And then at the end of the week, if I'm at 1,100, then whatever 2% of that too, so it's at $22. That's what I would bet going forward. So that way it's sort of like compounding interest. But I'm not a fan of betting, $100 on one team and $5 on another, or whatever. It's just not. I've tried it with just using like the straight Kelly recommendations, and it works, but I found that the risk wasn't really worth the reward. That's just me. If you want to use the Kelly to size your bets as well, then have at it, So based on this Chicago Blackhawks game, for instance, this is telling you to bet 5% of your bankroll. If it's worth it to you, go for it. But that's sort of, you could use a half Kelly at 2.5% or whatever the case is. But so this is it. hopefully you've liked this video. If you have any questions, hit me up. Either leave a comment below or hit me up on Twitter at actionbackers. Again, if you want to learn more about sort of everything that I do for my betting and how to find value and things like. We had some technical difficulties here. I was just saying to buy my book at Amazon. I'll leave a link down below. Thanks, everyone. See you soon.